MPO, the alternates, Dave is out. He doesn't want to do it. So it's just Karen Schwartz.
Okay.
Okay, and we're streaming, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Is there anybody else on the phone?
Hello, this is Leo Doseretz.
Hi, Leo.
Hey, how are you?
Oh,
Did I hear somebody else on the phone? No. Okay. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. I am Bill Johnson, representing Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. And
Kelly Miller, representing Commissioner Catherine Starkey, Pasco County.
Bob Henyon at large.
I'm Bill Roberts, appointed by Board Member Melanie Griffin at large.
Karen Mullins, representing Pinellas MPO.
Rick Richmond, representing Hillsborough NPO.
Jennifer Mendez with TBARTA.
Richard Bedford, representing Commissioner Panac.
Sarah Calhoun, representing the Sarasota Manatee MPO CAC.
Travis Norton, representing Pinellas County. And I have to say, I just got back from DC a couple weeks ago, and it was really nice riding the Metro Rail like every day. So.
It's the best.
Yeah.
They're nice on there.
okay, great. First item of business is to ask if we have any public comment.
We do not.
All right. The next item of business is the consent agenda items. We have one item on the consent agenda, which is the April 17th CAC minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes that need to be noted? Not hearing or seeing.
Mr. Chair, I move to have the minutes approved as submitted.
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved as presented. The major presentation and action item today is the draft Envision 2030 technical memorandum, number 1, baseline conditions report. Michael,
how long can you get that title?
Or are we going to just jump right into it?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to cue this up since this was brought before the committee at your April 17th meeting. And we have made quite a bit of progress with Envision 2030 since that time. So we've kicked off the first phase of public outreach. That was in May, and have held a large event in each county to both help build awareness of the plan and provide a wider cross-section of participants for our regional transit needs survey, live until July 1st, which you all should have received probably a couple of times now by email, and we've been sending that out by social media as well. The links to the survey have been provided in your packets that you should have in front of you. And that, again, has been sent several times through email. So also in your packets is the first technical memorandum, baseline conditions report, which is a bit of a mouthful. So this covers existing and forecasted conditions for transit, which we're asking for your feedback on today. While not an official action item, we would like some input on the findings, which we may be able to include in the final report. So one last thing before I turn it over to Mr. Ball, so you know the purpose of this report is really to provide a baseline or context on which areas of need and opportunity for future regional transit services can be evaluated and identified. With that, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Chair, members of the CAC, good to be back in front of the CAC again. What we want to do today is give you a brief update on the items that we indicate in this agenda. Mostly we're going to talk about the baseline conditions, but we'll also give you an update on the public outreach that's been held to date and what's coming up in the next few weeks. So first of all, we did want to mention that we did expand the technical advisory group. We added a member to represent the MPO staff directors. So there's 12 members of that committee now, and they're serving as the advisory group for the overall regional transit development plan. And their next meeting comes up next week as well. Okay, this first one, I'll talk about the map first. On the left side, that's the study area, the 5 counties, and it also shows the existing transit services and transit routes that are provided by those 5 transit agencies within the region, just to give you a feel for what's out there today. Doesn't mean all that service is regional, but that's the local services that are provided currently today. It also reflects the population projections that are coming up over the next 25, 30 years. You can see some significant growth from about 3.2 million to 4.6 million projected to occur over that time period. So it's over 40% growth that's projected. Also gives you a flavor for how much of that population is in each county of the region. This slide looks back at the growth that's occurred since 2000. You can see that the region as a whole has increased by about 30% in population. It also shows it by county, so you can see that 4 of the 5 counties have an increase in population of in the 40 to 50% range, with the exception of Pinellas that has a lot of essentially build-out areas where it's only been about 5%. Wanted to mention a couple observations about age distribution. We're just highlighting some of the key themes because there's a lot of data in there that you can read if you want to get into the details, but I wanted to highlight some key themes that come out of it. But if you look at age distribution as it's projected into the future, there's a couple of things I want to emphasize. It's the millennial population. Today is about 25% of the population. They certainly have different transportation preferences than for example, my generation, and certainly has implications for the regional TDP going forward. Also wanted to mention the older adult category, 65 and up, whereas today that's about 20% of the population. That's projected to increase over the next 20 or so years to 25% of the population. So those 2 categories play an even greater role moving forward. Wanted to mention the commuting as well. Unfortunately, there's still about 80% of us that commute to work by private automobile in driving alone, and only about 1 to 2% of those commuters are using transit for their work trip. That's been a consistent trend over the years. The bar chart on the left shows you how travel time changes with the use of driving alone versus using transit as a work mode. And you can see that, for example, shorter time commutes are generally associated with driving alone. When you look at the less than 20-minute commute, and then if you look at the greater than 40-minute commute, it's a higher percentage use transit for that particular trip.
Say that again. Could you go through that again?
Sure. And I'll say that there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, it takes longer to travel on transit, the way we have transit that's provided today. But generally, the longer trips are more amenable to be using transit. So there's some consistency there. And Chair, what I was basically saying is that those who drive alone generally have shorter commute travel times, and those that are more willing to use transit generally have longer travel times. That's where you see the difference in the percentage of use based on those travel times. That answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wanted to talk briefly about workflows. This particular chart shows the percentage of workers that actually work in a county different from where they live. So you can still see that Pasco and Hernando are still essentially bedroom communities to Hillsborough and Pinellas and other counties. So you can see that Pasco is the largest one, that largest proportion of workers leave the county to go to work. In terms of income, a couple things I want to mention. Historically, we've seen the percent of population that's below the poverty level has been gradually increasing since 2000, from about 11% to 14.5%. So that certainly continues to be an issue that we need to address, along with affordable housing that goes with that. And then secondly, when we look at the onboard surveys to see the type of riders that are using transit today, there's a significantly greater proportion of the transit riders than when you compare that to the general population as a whole. And that's what this table shows. So that the percent of riders that are low income is significantly greater than the percent of the total population. evident that the types and levels of transit service that we have today is being used to people that have very few options to them. Also holds true.
Can you go back one?
Sure.
So, for instance, in Manatee, it seems oddly high, given that on the right-hand column, all the percentages are basically the same. So what is it about Manatee that there's so much ridership at that level? Any ideas, or it's just statistics at this point?
Well, it can vary a little bit from county to county, but I can just say the general theme is consistent, is that those that have a more traditional propensity to use transit are the key riders that are using what we can provide today. And that's true in Manatee as well. But there may be, I mean, what specifically are you noting that's
Well,
different?
for instance, on the right-hand side, they're all the same, 25, 23, 22, 24, 25. They're all
Right.
similar. But the percentages in the middle of under 25,000 are not all the same. So what is it about one county that more of that population rides transit than another county?
Well, again, we're talking specifically about the low-income populations and what percent of the riders that use transit are low income. And given that we're providing service that is generally used by people that don't have any options today, you would expect the percentages to be higher in the counties for the existing ridership, which is higher than the averages for the whole county as a whole. Does that make sense? Because the other income categories aren't using it at a rate that the low income categories are. Okay, any other questions about that? I think our challenge is to improve the transit services for two reasons: to provide better service to those that are using it today, but also to provide a level of service that would get people to choose to use it. And that's our challenge in putting this plan together. Next one relates to minorities and limited English proficiency populations. Similar trend exists there, or correlation exists there between the types of riders that are using transit today versus the population as a whole. I wanted to mention the existing regional transit services. One of the items in your agenda packets is a larger 11 by 17 map that shows what we're describing as regional services that are provided today. And that's largely because they're providing service across the county line, or they're connecting regional activity centers. And it's really a starting point for us to build from as part of the regional TDP. Doesn't mean that it's the answer, but when I looked at the network, it's more extensive than I would have thought when we started the process. However, the level of service that's provided on those routes may not be at the level to make it a quality regional service. So that's what we'll be looking for as well. And this is just to zoom in on the parts of the region to show those routes as well. Just an update on outreach. We continue to provide information on the website. The regional survey is active out there as well and is open until July 1st, so we got a few weeks to go on that as well. We did have 5 events that we participated in, one in each county over the last month, and had some good exposure through that. And I have some preliminary results of the survey as of last week. So these results could change some when we finalize the survey, but I thought I would share some of the preliminary results with you today. First of all, the awareness of TBARTA was I think, higher than I expected it to be. In fact, people are familiar. 85% of the respondents are familiar with TBARTA, and a good portion of those are actually familiar with what they believe the purpose of TBARTA is. So that was interesting to me and something to build from as we move forward. We also asked them about the importance of regional transit, and good response there as well, as about 85% indicated somewhat or very important for regional transit service to be provided. A majority of those that responded had ridden transit in the region within the last year. Now that doesn't mean they've used it frequently. The next one at the bottom left there shows that they only have ridden it occasionally. Some of them use it regularly, but the majority have only ridden it occasionally. And where do they want to go? The top destinations are really the airport and the port. Other major destinations in the area, like hotels and then workplaces as well. So these are, again, some preliminary results. These may change as we get more responses, but I thought I would share some early results with you today. Here's where we are with the numbers. I feel good about the participation that we've generated so far. Lots of help from TBARTA staff getting the word out. But we've reached in one way or another over 4,000 people at this point, and we hope for that to grow significantly over the next few weeks as we continue pushing the survey out there as well.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
If somebody fills out the survey twice, do you count it twice, or is it, do you have a way of?
We can look at IP addresses, but if they provided it from different IP addresses, it would be counted again. So we can't completely control that.
But if they're filling that out from the same computer?
We would know that.
Okay.
Right. So one thing we are doing to make sure we get a feel for where the input and representation is coming from is we're tracking input by the zip code in which they live. So this map gives you an indication of where those responses on the survey and the comments on the project website are coming from so far. So it gives us an indication. We are getting a good representation of about 68% of the zip codes. Some of those zip codes are very few though, so we're using that as a way, can we push out to the areas that we're not getting responses from to make sure we get better representation. So that's what we're focusing on right now is can we share it with an MPO in Hernando, the MPO in Hernando again to help get the word out in Hernando because we haven't had a good response from Hernando yet. That's one good example. So we're going to look at that in other areas as well to see if we can't boost the response in those areas that we haven't had a good response yet. The last thing I want to talk about today, and I think I mentioned it in the last time I was in front of the CAC, but we are moving forward with a peer region analysis where we want to select some peer regional entities around the country that we can put case studies together and evaluate best practices and determine what characteristics of regional entities that have good applicability for the Tampa Bay area. So this chart shows that process that we use to come up with those areas. We started out with about 20 regional entities around the country that have some responsibility with regional transit. And we used the 6 factors in that second step to, at a high level, identify which ones would have the most relevance here for Tampa Bay. And using that, we've narrowed that down to 6 regional entities that we're going to go forward and put some case studies together. This map on the next slide shows you the 6 that we've selected. The first one is the ATL in Atlanta. The second one is in Minneapolis. Third in Seattle, the Sound Transit. Fourth is Sandag in San Diego. And then Valley Metro in Phoenix. And then the last one, we wanted one in Florida, so we've used the SFRTA, which is the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority. So for each of these 6 regional transit entities, we're going to do basically a case study and an infographic of each of those, and then pull out of them what we can learn best to compare and apply here to the TBARTA area.
Bill,
Yes.
looking at the Florida selection, do you think that one is, you obviously think it's a good comparison, but I would think Orlando or maybe even Jacksonville would be more similar in size and characteristics to Tampa. Would you agree or not?
I think we selected this one because it was more similar in structure of the TBARTA structure based on state legislation.
Okay.
Now, I agree that there's some characteristics of the population in the area that may be more inclined to be Orlando area. It probably could have gone either way, but that's a good comment. In the end, we wanted a good representation of the structure and the role that they play in South Florida.
Okay, thanks.
Help me understand that rationale or how they're similar to the structure here.
Sure. They're a regional transportation authority set up by Florida statute as well. They do operate commuter rail, but they have a relationship with local operators that's a little different than like Lynx, which operates all of the services directly in the Orlando area. So more of the structure of how they do, the SFRTA operates commuter rail and then contracts for shuttle service that provides connections to their stations. And then they have kind of a coordination relationship with the local transit operators. That work, that make sense, Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Did you look at how they were funded, or?
Well, that's what we'll do now in detail.
Okay.
For the 6 that we've identified. So we're gonna look in more detail at the service area population characteristics, the trends and growth in those areas, the types of services they provide today, the process that they're involved in terms of funding transit. I think I mentioned to you at the last presentation, like the ATL in Atlanta is a really good example that we're looking at, because they were recently established by legislation, and they have 2 key responsibilities, one of which is a regional transit plan, like we're doing here, and they also have regional oversight responsibility for transit funding, which is something we want to at least talk about and consider for TBARTA. Yes, ma'am.
Would any of these be considered a mentor? You're saying these are sisters. Are there any that stick out and go, wow, this is something we want to do?
I think that will be determined as part of this evaluation for these 6. If I go back to this slide here, that middle step, there's 6 focus areas. In the end, there's a table that was provided in your agenda package that has all of these. We tried to find at least one regional transit entity around the country that was really strong in one of these 6 categories. So that's what you end up seeing, is that each one of those covers one of these key areas.
Okay.
And in the end, we should
They
be able
don't
to,
all have them all at once.
Yeah.
They have, this one has this,
Yeah.
this one has that. Gotcha.
and we get the best of all worlds from each of those, so we can decide what's best for TBARTA.
Okay. I'm just looking for a cohesive, clear goal, and we're just going to have to piece it together. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And we may find out that one of them is the perfect example for TBARTA. It might be the ATL, but until we go through this, we'll take the best from each to get the best answer.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Bill, do you recall how many counties got wrapped into the ATL area?
I believe it's more than 5. It's like,
5 or 6?
I think it's 10 or 12. I think it's 12.
Yeah, okay. Oh, okay.
Wow.
It's a much bigger area. There's like 12 counties and 10 transit operators, is my recollection.
Do you know how many MPOs are in that area, or is it just?
They have one
MPO?
regional MPO
Right,
there, so it
right.
is different.
That's
It's
what
the
we're
ARC,
first with.
the Atlanta Regional Commission.
Okay.
But the ARC, which is the regional MPO, works closely with each of the counties on their comprehensive transportation plans. So the counties do play a greater role in putting that, and then they pull all those together into a regional plan. Okay. Really, that's all I had today. Next steps, we're going to take comments on the baseline conditions and finalize the first technical report. We'll be working on the trend analysis for existing transit conditions, how it's evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. Then we're moving forward with that regional peer analysis. I'm really excited to see what comes out of that, to see what we can learn from that process. And then we'll be moving forward with additional outreach over the next few weeks. Looking forward to finalizing the survey and coming back to you at your next meeting to share the complete results of the regional transit survey. And then we're continuing the education process, presenting to various forums throughout the region to get them more informed about where we are and where we're headed with this plan. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any other questions.
Questions, comments? Karen?
Of course, it's me. I just would like to see more of our Pinellas County North be included in this. I'm seeing a lot of empty spaces in there, and it's very pivotal that we get these people engaged in this, because if they don't like it, our whole county could say, no, we're not going to support this.
Totally agree, and that's why we're tracking the zip codes to at least identify those gaps. So hopefully we can do things to.
Do we have any events in that area?
Well, not immediately, but what we are immediately doing is trying to get it distributed so we can increase the survey completion rate in those particular areas.
Are
as a
we
starting
targeting?
point.
Is that,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bill?
Talking about going forward, do you think by our next meeting in 2 months that you'll have some updated information on this peer comparison, or is that a longer-term process?
Yes, and we're targeting a draft report to TBARTA staff. I think it's mid-July. So I think you meet again in August, correct? Or is it September?
August.
August. So we should be in good shape to give you a really good update at that time.
Good. Look forward to that.
Yeah. Have questions?
Let me ask one then. I've been at a couple of presentations recently in Pinellas County where they have looked at, focused on the poverty rate and something called ALICE, and I'm not sure I can get the asset limited, income constrained, but employed workers. And within the Clearwater area, between the poverty level and the ALICE, it was 50% of the population. And then there was another presentation talking about 5 of the areas in Pinellas County that has larger poverty. And so this is a real challenge for counties in trying to get from low-wage jobs to a higher-wage job base, and there's a lot going on with that. Is it tourist industry versus manufacturing industry? But I'm wondering whether there's implications as if that has an implication as part of this plan.
Was that through the MPO, perhaps, presentations?
The one presentation was from the city's Economic Development Department, Denise Sanderson.
Okay.
The other one was a presentation that County Commissioner Ken Welch was making comments to at the NAACP annual meeting.
Well, the first step I can take is I can follow up with Forward Pinellas just to see if they're familiar with the data you're talking about. Sir, we can certainly take a look at it and see if it has implications for what we're working on. So I'll follow up with Forward Pinellas to start with, and if you have other sources, Mr. Chair, that you can provide, then we'll follow up on that as well.
And then in the report that follows, there's really a lot of fascinating information, including the one chart on commuter inflow and outflow.
Right.
And I recall some of the conversations that have happened at the TBARTA board meeting talking about the amount of inter-county transit versus the need to invest in transit within the core areas. Of course, our responsibility is more regional transit. But I thought that information was.
And basically, everything in the baseline conditions we will be using in the next step, which is to look at travel demand and mobility needs, and how do we work in using this data to identify those and then come up with alternatives to address those. We're also working on putting together a model to predict ridership based on the ridership that's out there today, getting that ready so when we do develop the alternatives, we can kind of judge and compare and contrast which one would give us the best return on the investment.
I have one more question, and it's Pinellas County related. There are legislators who maybe not be on board with TBARTA, hearing some echoing in North County about pulling funds from transportation. I'd like to see us wrangle or at least start a discussion with the people who are in the Florida State Legislature as well as the county commissioners.
It's certainly part of our public involvement plan to do that. That's more David Green taking the lead on those discussions. We'll support him as he sees fit, but that's in our public outreach plan that we've shared with you in the past to make that happen.
All right, thank you.
So were you suggesting that we would contact the legislators and ask them to promote the questionnaire?
We could do that, yeah, that would be great, if they would be willing to do that in North County.
At some point last year, we also sent word back to the board that we as a body, the CAC, was willing to assist as necessary in terms of their legislative agenda and keeping up contacts. I've forgotten, it was probably September-ish
Right.
of last year.
What I can do is we have our monthly coordination meeting with all of TBARTA on Monday, and that's where I can bring up again the discussion of what the next steps are for what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's concerning. It's just,
It's in the plan, so we just need to decide when is the right time
okay.
to approach them.
Because this is the foundation, and the integrity of the project going forward depends on having a,
Right.
And meeting the legislative requirement that they've asked us to do.
right. And then, just go back to poverty on page 2-18. The absolute change in the poverty, if I'm reading this right, is the poverty rates are increasing in all of our counties.
Yes.
So.
It's like a slow increase, but it's definitely on that upward trend.
Yeah. And typically, the lower income riders benefit more, and they don't have to, if there's good transit available, then they don't have to take higher cost cars. So there's a lot tied together. And will your project look at land use?
It'll be a small piece of what we do. We can't get into the details for this long 10-year plan, but it's certainly part of our analysis of where demand is located for transit, because different land uses support transit more effectively, so we will certainly consider that in our analysis.
Okay. Michael or Leo, do you have any questions?
I don't have
Thank you,
one.
Mr. Chair. Would like to thank the committee for your input at this stage. I heard some really great observations based on your questions. A reminder again, and I heard it from you all already, we are still very early in this project, so it is a key time for the direction of this, and will provide, more robust and revealing analysis as we progress with future technical evaluation. We'll certainly keep you updated on that progress, and we'll continue to provide opportunity to weigh in on findings and eventually the recommendations as well. I did hear talk about assisting with promoting the survey that's live right now, currently scheduled to end on July 1st. So we certainly would like your continued assistance with that. In particular, some of those areas that Bill showed you on the map that we have not been able to reach to date. So we want to make sure we have a very broad and geographic representation, a cross-section here for this survey.
Okay, Leo, just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss you.
You did not. I did not have any questions, Chair.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking forward to coming back in August then.
This sounds like a regular agenda item for us. Thank you, Bill. The next agenda item is the TBARTA Commuter Services Program. We're honored to have Cindy Raskin, our new Director of Commuter Services. Michael, is there any further introduction of someone that we already know pretty well?
Yeah, I think you're all pretty well familiar with commuter services, although we are doing some new and exciting things with Cindy behind the wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her and let her talk about some of the things that are going on.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Certainly, you all are familiar on some level with commuter services. I'm just going to go through really high level of what our department is responsible for, give you some idea of the work that we have planned coming up in the coming months. So, you just heard from Bill and Michael about the Regional Transit Development Plan. That's a 10-year plan. Later on in your meeting today, you're going to hear about that Catalyst PD&E 41-mile project. Those are things that are happening in the future. There are things we can do today, right now, to help alleviate some of the congestion on our highways. And that's really the main task of the commuter services division here at TBARTA, is to reduce traffic congestion. These are some screenshots I took off of the FDOT cameras. Different times throughout the day, usually in the afternoon, you start to see the traffic building, and you all have been stuck in it. So, you know, this is representative of our life here in the Tampa Bay area. TBARTA Community Services, looking for anything that's not driving in the car by yourself. It could be van pool, carpool, biking, walking, using public transit, telecommuting. All of these things fall under the realm of commuter services. So our commuter service program is funded through grants through the Florida Department of Transportation. So we always like to make sure and acknowledge, recognize, and thank them for their support of our region. They certainly recognize that these are the ways to make our roadways more efficient if possible, and so they're happy to fund that for us. A few statistics. This is the presentation that I gave a couple of weeks ago to our board meeting, so these are a teeny bit old now, a few weeks old. These numbers are all better now. We have about 4,200 commuters in our database right now. In the month of March, we had 216,000 commute alternative trips that were taken. That's over 2 million vehicle miles saved, which is more than 4 trips to and from the moon. So that's pretty impressive. We do partner with Enterprise. They have a commute division that's new. They took over in this market and several other markets around the country, expanding upon their customer base and helping people that want to do commute alternatives instead of just renting cars. They actually have 145 van pools right now. And the team that we work with actually has staff in our TBARTA office, so they're right outside my office, and we work very closely together. And they have been the top sales for March, and they also were top for April. So they are being recognized nationally among their commute peers. The goal is to reach 230 vans in the year 2020. It's a pretty lofty goal, but we think we can get there. Enterprise is already committed to ordering 60 new vans next year, so we'll be prepared for that. And the miles that our van pools travel return funding to us in the form of what's called 5307, which is Federal Transit Administration funding. So we do get funding back into TBARTA for providing those van pools. Of course, making a successful team and something like this, because we're not selling a tangible product, what we're selling is a behavior change. So we have to have a really strong, committed team. Right now, the team is myself. I've been at TBARTA for almost 3 months now, but I do have a transit background. I was in transit for more than 20 years in marketing transit, so I'm familiar with that piece. And we're adding staff based upon geographic area. So the plan is to have people targeting specific geographic area. Somebody in Pinellas, somebody in Hillsborough, and then somebody that's doing Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus. So that those salespeople can really get integrated into their communities, get to know the people that they're serving, and be able to provide commuter services for the businesses there. So we're also currently working with a consultant to help us define our program offerings, so that we're making sure we're offering the products that people want, and that we're talking about them in a way that's appealing and compelling to people to give them a try. We're working on an outreach and work plan. We are also working on making sure that the key performance indicators, things we've been tracking, are the right things to track. Make sure we're looking at those. And then we're also working on designing some new marketing materials. And that is the end of my formal presentation. I would love to take any questions.
What does Enterprise get out of the partnership?
Well, Enterprise manages the van pool program for us. TBARTA subsidizes the cost of the van for the van pool participants. We pay $400 per van per month. So Enterprise takes our $400, and then each of the van pool participants pay their portion of what the cost of the van is and the ministering of the program. So when they go in and they kind of do it as a package price. So they could, if you have 6 people at your company, you could pull up, a 6-passenger, 7-passenger van, and they can tell you based upon your basic starting point and your common destination, how many miles that is, tolls, wear and tear in the vehicle, and each person in the group pays a monthly fee.
I know originally you started with public sector jobs and then you expanded out into the private sector. Is there a differential in the reimbursement rate for the two?
There's not. From a TBARTA perspective, we pay the $400 subsidy per van per month. So far, Enterprise has been focusing in the past on federal government entities, and those federal government employees get a subsidy from their employer. So some of the people in the van pool are paying very little. Some of them are probably paying nothing to be able to participate in that van. Our subsidy is the same, but the employer's subsidy could vary anywhere from $0 up to $265 per month.
Say that again, up to how much?
TBARTA subsidizes $400
Right.
per van per month, and then the employer can subsidize up to $265 per person per month. And that's a federal qualifying, they call it qualifying fringe benefit that the federal government allows you to offer to your employees.
Right, that goes to the employee, not to TBARTA.
Right, that goes to the employee. So you as an employer can offer a transportation benefit. In this particular van pool instance, the employee is using it to pay for their portion of the van, but you could also just give it to the employee and allow them to use it for a van pool or public transit. Some places use it for public transit passes, or instead of giving $265, they give whatever the actual value of a transit pass is if they wanted to subsidize that. So if somebody in Pinellas and Hillsborough wanted to do the passport that's good in both systems, it'd be $85, and they could subsidize that $85 100% to their employees.
Have you done benchmarking to other systems around the country? You said that Enterprise got ranked as #1 amongst all of their programs across the country. It sounds pretty good, but how about, are there other companies like Enterprise or transit agencies that do this on their own? And
Yes.
if they do, then what are they doing to make it work better?
Enterprise is kind of the big player in the game. They have the majority, but they don't have all of them. Some places are models like ours, where you have an organization that works with a vendor, which is Enterprise. There's other places where it's the local transit system. There's some places in Florida that have a commuter assistance program like our TBARTA Commuter Services, but the individual transit systems offer their own van pool, and some of them have their own vans and lease their own, take care of it all directly. So it really is widely varying. For our area, we have the most vans in Florida in our area. So we're definitely looking at what our plans are going to be moving forward. Really fantastic research is being done by the Center for Urban Transportation Research at USF. They're working on looking at the Tampa Bay area from a regional, what they call transportation demand management program perspective. So they're helping us put together some metrics for the entire Tampa Bay area, what it should look like moving forward.
Karen?
Are we looking for anything in Manatee County? Because I noticed you're doing District 7 and District 1 is not there.
Right, so Manatee County is in TBARTA's service area,
Right.
but they are in District 1 FDOT. So their commuter services program, their carpool, van pool, emergency ride home, is managed by, they just rebranded to Commute Connection, which is a separate contractor. Now, we've built very good relationships with those contractors and are talking about ways that we can help our commuters match across those borders in separate databases. So Manatee is handled by District 1. We actually handle Citrus, which isn't in TBARTA's service
Right.
area any longer, but they're in the DOT service area, so we serve them.
Okay. I understand that, but is there a way to be inclusive to make it so that we're thinking about Manatee as well as the rest of us? I mean, I don't want the conversation to just be District 7.
Well, it's working together with the contractor that's providing that service. They're just now starting there. A new provider has taken over that contract from another provider. So we have met with them and talking with them about how we can do things together to try to make that as seamless a process as possible.
Thanks.
We'll try to facilitate that as much as we can.
And kind of going off what Bill was saying, if there's any kind of other organizations like Enterprise in the area that are doing this job, I would like to see them.
There aren't any.
There aren't any.
Well, it's a competitively bid contract, and I wasn't here when
I
they
know,
did
you
the bid. But my understanding is Enterprise is really the only one that's out there bidding. You know, they've bought out the smaller companies. It used to be a company called V-Ride that did it for TBARTA, and they were purchased by Enterprise, so.
Okay, I guess we're done with that unless Leo has any questions.
No questions here, Chair.
Well, thank you for letting me share this information with you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. And next item on their agenda is some feedback reports on the Flamingo passes that have been distributed to the members of this board. I guess the first question is, I know I had received it. Have the rest of you received the passes?
I received mine, but I haven't used it yet.
I received mine, my wallet was stolen, I hadn't activated it yet. So I'm gonna approach Michael about seeing whether I can get another one.
Okay,
Wow.
all right. Other rider?
Yeah, no problem, Bill. We'll get you another one.
Thanks.
Other rider experiences? I have a couple to share, but I used it just to go from basically my house. I drove down to the mall, which is Countryside Mall, and then took that down to City Hall. There's a bus that runs fairly frequently. It's one of the more the highest ridership routes in Pinellas County, so it runs fairly frequently, and it was really very easy to get on. It took about an hour to get there, maybe 40 minutes to an hour, and it was very effective because it takes you right down to downtown, close to where the city meetings that I was going to, and coming back. For me, you have to think about when the next bus is going to be leaving. And so I had to get acquainted with the smartphone app to which one, and I thought that there was a Google Transit app, but I could not find that, so I did find the PSTA app and was able to find, well, when the next bus is leaving. The second experience, and the reason I took the bus, was I wanted to go on a trail ride from downtown Clearwater to downtown Dunedin. And so I have a new car, and it doesn't have a bike rack on the back. And I said, well, I'll just throw it in the back of my car. But I thought I needed to make sure that the bike will fit in the car, and I found out I couldn't get it in. So I was kind of wondering, how in the world am I going to make this trail ride? I don't want to ride all the way down to Clearwater, because that's about 5 miles, and that's a little far for a novice bike rider. So I finally figured out, well, I can ride to the shopping center, which is about 1.5 miles from my house, and then use the bike rack on the bus to get to downtown Clearwater. And then when I get done with the bike ride in Dunedin, I can get on the bus route from Dunedin to back to the shopping center and ride home. And all of that worked fairly well, except initially I underestimated the time it would take me to ride from my house to the shopping center, and I saw the bus leaving as I was getting there. But because it makes a big loop around the square that the shopping center, I was able to cut the shortcut and catch it. But if I had not done that, I would have been late for the start of the ride. The other side was when I was planning to leave, I saw the time leaving downtown. The problem I did not look at was the time point that I assumed was in downtown Dunedin was actually a little bit farther east. And so I actually missed the connection that I was going to take the last leg of the trip. And then looking at that the route changed. So at that point in time, instead of having a route every 30 minutes, it was an hour segment. So I ended up just riding all the way home. So I got some extra exercise.
Can I give some advice on that? Put the bike on the bus and take it to where you're gonna start, to where you're gonna end.
Uh-huh,
Take the bus all the way to the end and then ride it back.
uh-huh.
So that way you know you're gonna because you're gonna run into problems getting the bike on the bus if the bus rack is full.
Yes.
And if you wait for that last bus, like on a Sunday when there's no other bus coming, I've had to turn people away because the bike rack was full and we had a full bus and we couldn't get it on the bus. So I would suggest taking the bus to the end, where you're gonna, your destination, and then ride back.
Yeah. Of course, for me, I wanted to do this kind of ceremonial bike ride between downtown Clearwater and downtown Dunedin, and it was to promote bike riding and the trail use, and it was organized that there were some interim stops along the trail ride, talking about what's going on in that locale from an economic development standpoint, how they were bridging and including the trail and what they were doing in their city. Dunedin's really got their act together regarding the trail use there. So, Bob.
I've been pushing for this for a while, and I finally saw it's getting done today. Dunedin is remarking all of the trail in the downtown area for the CRA in order for people to know which is the bike lane, which is northbound, southbound, and pedestrian. Because of the high usage in that area, all the pavement markers have worn off.
Ah, okay.
So we had people in there marking the pavement today.
Great. Okay. I know that I've considered using it for going to several other meetings, and looking at the schedule, it does take quite a bit longer than driving point to point. So I would encourage you to share your future experiences as well.
Okay.
Any other comments on that? Next agenda item is TBARTA status update on the catalytic PD&E update. And I guess, Chris, you're going to handle that. Well, you're going to introduce our mystery guest, huh?
No mystery. No mystery. No. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Dianantis. I'm a senior planner with TBARTA. I'm here with Scott Brinkall of WSP, and we're going to give you a brief presentation regarding the regional BRT PD&E. Planning studies and the regional transit feasibility plan were completed, which brings us to this part of the project development and environmental study. TBARTA and WSP had a kickoff meeting about a month ago, May 9th. The team that WSP has put together is comprised of 16 firms with significant support from AECOM, Tyndall Oliver, and Kinetics Transportation Group. The team also includes a panel of national BRT experts, and a host of other team leaders. The PD&E is expected to answer these questions. Where does the service run? Outside lane or inside lane? Dedicated lanes? How many stations are there going to be? Where are those stations going to be located? And how do you access those stations? As well as how do you stimulate economic growth? How is the project funded? How does this project set the stage for future projects? And how can local transit benefit this project? And now I will turn it over to Scott to go through the work plan and schedule.
Can I just ask you, on the presentation that you went back to, the panel of experts, this I don't think was on the website, this presentation, so if you could distribute it to us. I was interested in the, I saw Scott Walker or Jared? Jared? Yeah. And so.
You want to go back?
No, if you can make sure that we get this.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. Committee members, Scott Pringle with WSP. I'm the consultant project manager for the regional PD&E. I'm going to walk you through the work plan, but there's a couple of things I'm personally very excited about with regards to the project. As you indicated, Mr. Chair, we have a number of national experts that we're going to bring to bear. So I thought it was really important for us to be able to ask these folks that have been doing these projects all over the country what some of our concerns and questions are and hear how it's being addressed in other areas. So we have everything from folks who have worked on or actually led projects in Portland, Seattle, Indianapolis, Atlanta, the Cleveland Health Line, I think you've heard a lot about too. So I'm really excited to bring those folks in front of you, and we will do so over the next 2 years. The work plan itself is devised into a couple of key milestones. The first major milestone is basically looking at what we did in the last phase, the planning phase or that feasibility phase, and taking a step back from that recommendation, that catalyst recommendation, and begin addressing those questions that Chris mentioned. So the feasibility plan was intended to determine the corridor, which is the 275 corridor, and select a mode, which has been selected, the bus rapid transit. But it also brought to our attention a lot of questions or concerns, whether it's coming from the community or from stakeholders, as to how much of this is dedicated. How many stations do we really need? Where are the stations? What kind of stations are there? What is the opportunity for economic development around those stations? And a whole host of questions. And in the first 6 months, in this first milestone, we're going to do just that. We're going to take that step back. We're going to reevaluate that catalyst recommendation. We're going to start answering some of those questions so that when we go into the actual design in NEPA, that we've got a couple of those questions answered, and we're able to streamline how we attack our environmental compliance review, as well as the initial engineering and concept development. So once we've taken that step, let me go back a couple other things. So we're going to talk about how, to sort of revisit that catalyst. What are the changes that we can make before we go into the next steps? But there's a couple other critical items that we're going to tackle in that first 6 months. Really, the first 6 months is going to be very important. It's going to be a lot of conversation and a lot of, setting the groundwork for what work will come behind it. Specifically, another big element in the first 6 months will be the beginnings of what we're calling the strategic funding blueprint. So obviously, to implement a project of this kind, we really need to understand what the federal grant opportunities are, what the state grant opportunities are, and probably most importantly is what are the opportunities for local funding. So we're going to start talking about that right up front, right in the first 6 months. We're not going to potentially have answers or decisions on all those elements in that financial plan, but we're going to start developing the architecture or the framework or ultimate strategy that we'll work on for the the remaining 2 years, 2.5 years, until we get to that final solution. We have a project, and hopefully we'll also have a plan to both implement that project. So after that first milestone, the next milestone is developing 10% design. In that 10%, we're going to be looking at stations and having major public outreach. We're going to do station charrettes, open workshops that are very interactive, very dynamic, allowing people to have a conversation about the stations that are important to them in their neighborhoods, location, but how big should the station be? What amenities does the station need to have? What does it need to look like? And those different elements. And it's a great way to engage the public and really make sure that we're hearing what their desires are for those particular stations. Once we've got stations locked down, the next step is to go into actual NEPA. We're going to start working with FTA at that point, complete our environmental compliance review. Once we finish the NEPA, we're going to do the heavy lift of NEPA in that third milestone, that's step 3, approximately another 6 to 8 months worth of work. Then we're going to take that information and go into 30% design. We're not going to close out NEPA because we want to have this relationship between the environmental work and what we're seeing on the design side. Do the heavy lift of the environmental, that helps inform 30% design. Conversely, when we finish with 30% design, that will also inform NEPA. So we'll make some adjustments to NEPA. Those two are going to work concurrently, really work in tandem. And as we get to the end of that fourth milestone, we'll have both 30% design complete, and we'll go and have our decision on the NEPA or the environmental compliance. And it's at that point we're actually going to look to submit an application to FTA for federal funding. A couple of things that we're going to also be talking about in the first 6 months that will really guide a lot of the conversation on how we work this project over the next 2+ years is funding, station locations I talked about, but phasing. This is a long corridor. It's 41 miles. Are we doing the entire 41 miles up front, or are there phases that we can tackle and implement over time? And that also impacts how we're doing our NEPA. That also impacts how we're doing our design and ultimately how we're submitting this project to the FTA for their approval for funding and advancing to final design. Throughout, we're going to have continuous public outreach. We're going to use a lot of the tools we used during the feasibility portion, where we'll have speakers bureau, small group meetings, one-on-one meetings with elected officials, with stakeholders. But at every milestone, we're going to have a major outreach event. At the end of that first 6 months, we're going to have the opportunity for folks to weigh in on answering those questions. How much of the corridor is in a dedicated lane? How many stations are there? Where are the stations? Get that public input. We're also hoping to have an opportunity where we bring in all those national experts and allow the public to ask questions and hear answers from, like I said, from these folks that have been doing it all over the country. But bottom line is that every major milestone, we're going to have a major public outreach event so that we're constantly getting that communication with the public. And the contract as a whole is 3 years. We anticipate that we can complete this effort in about 28 months. But we've got extra time in the schedule because what is most important is that as we go through each one of these steps, if we need more time to have more dialogue and more discussion with stakeholders, with the public, we can do so. So we've got the technical work, we're going to move forward with that, but we're also allowing plenty of time to really have this consensus building outreach arm as part of the project as well. So you can see the schedule here. I talked about the 28-month schedule. We've got 8 months that we have in contingency. If we need to use it, if we need it for extra stakeholder or extra public outreach, we can certainly do so. We've already begun reaching out to some of the board members in one-on-one settings, just kind of introducing the project, letting them know we're kicking it off, asking each board member what are some of their thoughts on the project and what are some of their initial reactions or expectations. You can see the 4 comments we've gotten so far. The question about station locations has come up several times. And actually, in response to that, We had initially thought that maybe we would start talking about station locations after the first 6-month period, but because of the interest, I think we're going to actually advance that and embed that into the schedule a little bit earlier than we originally anticipated. The importance of including technology came up several times in our meeting with the board members. We're also had several conversations about funding, as you'd imagine, being important, and that's where that strategic blueprint will really come into play, and then making sure that whatever we're doing on the regional system, that we've got those seamless connections to local transit and the opportunity to expand this project into Manatee, into Hernando, if it is successful. So those are some of the comments we've been hearing so far. We're continuing to do those 101s. We had one this morning. We have 2 tomorrow. We have several next week, including the opportunity to talk to both mayors, Mayor Kreisman and Mayor Castor. So we'll keep reporting back to you on that information and keep you guys updated. But just wanted to let you know we're making progress. We're on our way and we're getting started. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions.
Questions? I would let you know, and I think you've probably been given it from staff, the Tampa Bay Partnership has asked that they address this body to ask for our help in embedding in this the gold standard for BRT. And at the back of the agenda item that you received, not here at the desk, but the one that was on the website, there's a copy of apparently what they have used as their standard and how that works. They actually asked if they could come to our group and present this, and so we would understand it. It might be better to do that in a combination with what you're doing, or I'm looking for the pleasure of the committee as to how you'd like to proceed with this request from the partnership. Bill?
Mr. Chair, I think it would be helpful, certainly to me and maybe to all the committee, if we had them come and do a presentation on what the gold standard is in their view and why they think it would be important to incorporate that in what Scott's planning. So I think that would be a good approach.
We could include that in our next committee meeting if that's the pleasure of the body.
If I may, Chair,
Yeah.
during the feasibility plan, we did have the ITDP come down and visit Tampa, and actually I personally gave them a tour of the 275 corridor and walked them through the concept as it stood there at that time during the planning phase. They ultimately came back to us with some great recommendations, mostly focused on the stations, so we're starting to see a common theme how important these stations are going to be. And making sure that we have good connectivity to the stations, that they're very walkable, very bikeable, really embedded, effectively into neighborhoods. That was one thing that was really important to the ITDP. The concept of a freeway BRT is something that's new in the U.S., and it's kind of essentially I would call it cutting-edge BRT concept that's really emerged over the last 2 to 3 years. I think the concept itself was also new to ITDP when we introduced it to them. However, after giving them the tour of the corridor, I think they really began to understand the concept. And ultimately, at the end, they came back to us with a report giving us, at a bare minimum, the bronze standard with what we've provided to them, with an upside with some of the things that they identified of easily achieving a gold standard with this project.
Okay. Bill?
Question for Scott. This may be something you're not prepared to answer, but there is discussion at the Hillsborough MPO level about the DOT study for the interstate rebuilding, for lack of a better term. Included in that current study is the examination of what's commonly called the boulevard concept, which could potentially eliminate part of Line 275. So my question in that context is, does this plan that currently we have rely totally on the existence of a high-speed interstate system running the entire 41 miles, or do you foresee it being able to adapt?
So I'll say two things to that. We can't overlook the opportunity and the partnership with FDOT, because the concept all along is that as they go through and make improvements to the interstate, that they're going to do things to widen the shoulder, make it full depth pavement, which is a huge benefit to the transit project. And those costs would actually be borne by the highway side of things, not the transit. So in that sense, we do need a highway project in order to keep this transit project, cost efficient and cost feasible. Now, if there is a change in how segment 7, which is that piece north of downtown Tampa to USF or Beers, if that changes, I did mention a comment that we need to look at phasing. It's a long corridor. There are still opportunities. Maybe the conversation then focuses more on St. Pete to Tampa. And, we have a different conversation about what we do north of downtown Tampa.
We're not talking about it.
We're not talking about it. So, yet to be seen. I can't speak to what the outcome of the hearing will be.
Yeah, nor can
Bob?
Just a passing comment. I think it's good that you're focusing on the stations ahead of the original schedule. It's important that the citizens get a sense of ownership, and also we hear any objections, and before letting it brood out there,
Agreed.
It involves people in it and makes the process more democratic.
I agree completely. So I'm very happy to do so and plan to do so. The other element to that too is I think it's also a great opportunity to engage some of our stakeholders like the MPOs and the planning commissions.
But Chris, I would add to that the station discussion is inseparable from the route discussion, it seems to me. And so I assume you're going to be examining all those various alternatives at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I mean by design options, which is that first milestone. So going into NEPA, going into that 10%, 30% design, we're still going to have a couple of variations on a theme that we can test through that process. So that first 6 months, answer some of those questions, come up with a couple of, 3 or 4 different options that then we run through the NEPA evaluation and through design to come out with the ultimate decision.
A question for Michael. Michael, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, so do we have any of the 6 from the Envision, the sister companies, are any of them dealing with this particular issue, this BRT on the side of the highway?
I believe PSTA is looking at a project that relates to it. It's very conceptual at this point. I'm not quite sure where they stand this time, but it is something called a concept of operations. If it's in the interest of the committee, we could look into that and provide more information in time for the next meeting.
Okay, so I'm talking about, the Seattle Transit, the ATL, are any of these, the 6 that we were looking at for Envision, are any of them dealing with this BRT?
Yes.
Sorry,
Seattle
Karen,
is-
I misunderstood. I believe they are, but which one specifically, I'm not sure of, so
Seattle's
we
in
can make sure to...
the process of implementing their version of freeway BRT. The ATL is actually beginning their conceptual design for the Georgia 400, which is also a freeway-based BRT.
All right, so we don't have an up and running
No, it's
BRT on the side of the road.
It's a very new concept. There are predecessors. Minneapolis has many miles of shoulder running transit. However, it's not necessarily dedicated space on the shoulders. It just allows the transit vehicle to use the shoulder when when traffic gets to the point where it's, 30 miles or less.
I thought that's what we were doing in the Pinellas portion of it.
The pilot study, the PSTA, that is correct. That's
Okay.
exactly what
So if we could
Thanks, Scott.
utilize, gives people an idea to see it
Yeah.
in Minneapolis, maybe we can use the optics of that
Yep.
and bring it to the people here.
Well, I'm really excited to have on our team, actually my deputy project manager. He runs the BRT design for all of WSP for the United States. And he's the project manager and is heavily involved in those projects in Seattle, in Georgia. So as soon as the next opportunity, he was just here a week ago, we're going to give him to come down and talk to you here at the committee, and he will be able to explain all of those projects in great detail.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments? If none, I'd like to jump in on one of the things that you said that I'm so pleased with is you're bringing in the concept of how it would be funded locally from the local. Because if it doesn't do us any good to have all this wonderful federal funding if we don't have the local funding match. And the farther we get into the project without involving more of the local grassroots folks and building some of that, I think creates a problem. I know it was a problem in Greenlight, where we had gotten so far into the design, but we really didn't have the grassroots structure to support and advocate for that. So I'm glad that that's there. I'd like to go back to part of the presentation that Bill talked about. We're talking about the longer the routes, the more effective transit is. And I think that's perhaps one of the things that would benefit this particular route, and attracting choice riders. Is that would that kind of fit?
Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing that we're going to be looking at here is the fact that we can bypass congestion with those dedicated lanes, and we're really looking at a premium style service that will definitely be very much attractive to folks who generally don't use transit. And it's highly visible. If it was actually if we can get this thing implemented on I-275, everybody drives 275. Everyone would see that.
Okay. And then the last item is, as we were talking about, my interest in trying to help solve the poverty, economic opportunities for those in the lower income categories. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody on the phone with questions, comments? Nope. Well, thank you very much. I didn't realize Scott, you were going to be able to join us. Thank you for coming and your presentation. And thank you, Chris. Next agenda item is the TBARTA website design. And I think it's a different Chris.
Indeed, you got another Chris. We're still debating who's Chris 1 and Chris 2, but I'll let you know how that works out. I am Chris Jadek. I am the Director of Communications. I've been on board for about 2 months now, so I think I did see you at the last CAC meeting. And it's great to have a chance to talk to you about our new website redesign. So a little background on this. TBARTA entered into a contract, thanks to our partnership with PSTA, back in January with FKQ. FKQ had done the website redesign for PSTA, so we knew of them. We worked out a statement of work and some business requirements earlier in the year. I came on board a couple months ago, and that's when the work really got underway. So today I can show you some of the creative because we have advanced. First, I'll look at the current website just to see what we're working from. There was a time when this was actually very contemporary. There was a time when the philosophy was you had to put a lot of things on your website so that people had a lot of resources to use. But of course, times have changed. And if you look at that, the first impression I get is rather cluttered. So for a number of reasons, the website was due for a redesign. But before we decided what we wanted to do with it, we established a few objectives and some goals. So first of all, our objectives. We want to provide a modern and contemporary web experience that best represents a world-class transit organization. I think you'd agree, what you see reflects the quality of the organization behind it. So we want that to reflect that we are a world-class transit organization. We wanted to remove the outdated content, certainly, and present relevant information in a conversational language that connects with multiple stakeholders. And of course, we want to make the features easy to find, understand, and use. I also thought it was important that we identify the audience. Who are we actually speaking to? Well, first of all, we're speaking to people who are living and working in our 5-county TBARTA region. We're speaking to state, local, and federal governments who come and look at us and want to evaluate the quality and the caliber of TBARTA. We're speaking to the economic development interests in the 5-county TBARTA region, those who are going to benefit from improved transit to get them on board with our initiatives, and of course, our transit partners as well. So the website is an instrument that conveys what we are, but it's also a usable document that has to adhere to a lot of state requirements. With that, this is the redesign as it now stands. This is the first look at the creative, which we signed off on 10 days ago. I'm pausing a minute just to give you a chance to look at that. So I will walk you through a couple of pages, but first and foremost, you'll notice we have a young lady there. She's a transit rider. We wanted to focus on the human connection because above all else, we're really not talking about buses or trains or boats. We're talking about how we serve people. And so we wanted to make sure that our first image was somebody of a satisfied commuter. And so that's one reason why that image is there. Second item you probably notice is we have a slug line. Tampa Bay's regional transit future starts here. I think it was important for you when you come to the website because I do think what TBARTA is still evolving. As we know, TBARTA's mission has changed, and certainly that branding and that imagery, that's a work in progress. And the website's going to really be a foundation for a lot of that branding that we do moving forward. So what is TBARTA? How do you describe TBARTA? And how do you do it succinctly? Well, for now, we've come up with Tampa Bay's regional transit future starts here. And another element we added was we added this map that you'll see of our 5-county region, because I think it's also important for people to understand who it is and what we actually serve. There is still confusion that people know HART, they know PSTA, but we really are not a transit operation in terms of operating buses as it is right now, so it's important for people to understand it. So coming to the homepage website, that's the first thing that you'll actually see. Now these are static pages. I don't have a staging area where I can page through this and show you this, but I did grab some screenshots to show you a little bit more. As you page down, and you'll notice I left the top of the page up there so you can see that this actually is a little bit below the fold, as we say. You will then see some imagery regarding our commuter services. We talked about being conversational language, share the ride and the benefits. The icon basically, I think, is very contemporary artwork, so I think FKQ did a nice job on that. And we have some language we're playing around with, but it's basically promoting our van pool services. We'll promote our commuter services and give some reasoning for why that would be appropriate, as well as ways by which people can actually sign up. If we page down, continue further, we have what is basically adjustable content for now. You can see we put the Envision 2030 there. We want to make sure that people understand when TBARTA meetings are, so the calendar that is there, we want to make sure that that is prominent and easy to find. And our emergency ride home program is where we promote that there. These things are adjustable as we move forward. So as we evolve, as Vision 2030 evolves, or we want to put up something about the BRT, we can change those things out. We will have a content management system that allows us to have complete control over the content we provide. And as you continue to page down, it would say latest news, and there would be some news releases or whatever it is we actually want to promote. So for the Envision 2030, if we're promoting our survey right now, we might change that link to, hey, take the survey, click here for English, click here for Spanish. We will have that flexibility, and the content management system will be more robust than we currently have, allowing us to make those changes as we need to. Another look at a couple of pages. This is one of the inside pages. And keep in mind, this is a still work in progress. So when you see on the right side column where it says Project 1, Project 2, those will actually have names to them. But this is an example of what the inside page would look like. The picture of the man up there is really just sort of, it's a hold for picture, so that may not be the imagery we went with. But one thing I would point out here is, you'll notice the menu is sticky at the very top. That menu you saw on the home page is the same menu you'll see on the inside as you move forward. We actually, our logo, TBARTA, and the full name of the organization stays on the screen at all times, so we continue to refocus the brand itself. And then there's actually going to be some pull-down menus there, which I think, see if the next page shows that. Yeah, this is an example of the pull-down menu. And this, of course, is where the governing board would be. Each of the pictures, certainly the titles would be filled out. We'd have biographies to click there. So we're still filling out the content. But I put a screenshot of this page in so you can see when you hover over commuter services, that is the menu that will slide down. It's very similar to any other website that you saw. The other ones will also have tabs. We did try to streamline the menu, as you can tell. About certainly talks about who we are and fulfills a lot of the state requirements of posting the information that we need. Commuter services is the second menu, and of course I pulled that one down so you can see a lot of the things that Cindy is working on. Planning and projects would give you a tab for Envision 2030 and our BRT. Boards and committees, everybody that's on the boards and the committees, the CAC, everybody's listed there along with appropriate contact information. And then contact us, which actually appears several times, because I want to make sure this is a very functioning website. I know one thing personally, when I go to a website, a lot of times I need a phone number, or I need a name of somebody and an email address. So under the contact, you'll have actually two tabs, which will also be on the About Us. First of all, we'll have the executive committee. We'll have David Green's picture, email address, phone number, as well as mine, Cindy, all the executive team as well as other information by which you can contact us. And it will give us our web address and other information that you need to have. And then I'm bringing you back to the home page once more so you can see the overall vision. It is certainly a cleaner look and an uncluttered look, and hopefully it accomplishes our mission of kind of solidifying the brand and furthering the mission. I will show you one more thing before I move on. It's not related to the website, but we have relaunched our weekly newsletter, and we've called it On the Go. And if you're not getting the weekly newsletter and would like to, please give me your email address. I can't just arbitrarily put email addresses on without people asking. But if you need that, just let me know. I hope that you do get that and take a look at this. I think the way the newsletter was being used, we were sending out sort of a collection of other transit information, but we were not using the newsletter to convey what TBARTA was doing. So the newsletter now is going to, first and foremost, needs to do some of that, and it will. So you'll see there, if you have seen it, it will most often include a message from David Green. It'll be very succinct. It has been promoting our Envision 2030 campaign. We recently got a fair amount of television coverage for Envision 2030, so it highlights that. But it will also have other transit news that might be of interest. Richard Branson and the Bright Line train, that gets a lot of interest. I might put a link in there. The point is that this newsletter should further the TBARTA message, and I will use other transit news as appropriate to kind of make it more robust, because on a weekly basis, we're not generating that much news, but at the same time, we want to have a vehicle by which when we want to communicate things, we can. So I'll give you an example. We talked about some of the preliminary study results that came out. One of David's messages early on was thanking people who took the survey, and he said, you know, as we start to get results of the survey, I will let you know what those are. So after this meeting, I'll talk to Bill, and hopefully we can take some of those, and those may be in the next newsletter. The idea is people who I think have signed on to the newsletter obviously are very engaged with us. They want to know what we do, and I'm very much about transparency. We need to make as many people know what's going on. And those who have said, you know what, there's a lot of stuff I don't want in my email box, I don't want to be cluttered, but I want news from TBARTA. Well, then we have, I think, an obligation to deliver a good experience. I don't want to just clutter their mailbox with information that's not pertinent. So the idea is to make this an enjoyable publication to read, provide information that maybe they haven't gotten elsewhere in a succinct way by which you can go through, find what you want, and then move on. And with that, I will go back. I'll take it back to the website homepage, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this or any other communications questions.
Kelly. And I may have missed this in the beginning. Did you say you've already launched this?
No, this will launch in August.
Okay.
So it takes a fair amount of work. FKQ does. The process is we have to sign off on the creative design, as they say. I delivered pages of content to them to populate the pages, and now they're undergoing all of that work. So right now, mid to late August date is when we would probably launch it.
It looks fantastic.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Is it mobile?
Yes. There'll be a mobile app. Yes,
it'll just automatically reformat for mobile?
Yes, it will. Yes. And I don't have those screen grabs, but in the future I can show you that. But yes, mobile friendly, that's a requirement these days.
One more quick question. Is there a TBARTA app?
We don't have an app, and we could take a look at that. If we had an app, if we were selling tickets or we had a reason for an app, an app just to communicate the news, I don't know if that's necessary at this point. But if we had a functioning reason for an app, what would you do with the app? I'm always open to that, but we do not at this time, but that is certainly a consideration.
Maybe like a regional way to go between all the different counties, you know? Like a transportation, one general link. Just a thought.
No, I'll tell you, the better we can serve transit needs, the better we help facilitate our brand too. So if it was to, hey, help you get transit information you need, regardless of whether it's TBARTA providing it or one of our partners, that might be have some benefit.
Right, like you get off the plane in an airport, right? And then you got one thing and you're going, wherever you're gonna go, you've got one.
I think it's a good idea. That's something we would consider.
Great, other questions? Leo, you still with us?
Yep.
Maybe.
He's wowed.
Yeah, I just printed out the on-the-go newsletter.
Very good.
That's a great newsletter.
So, okay, any, Karen?
Real quick, we're gonna have the website be mobile ready, right?
Yes.
Okay. So criteria for
Good.
search.
Absolutely.
Chris, would it be possible for people to take, for example, the Envision 2030 survey as a link on the website when you get it up? Is that the sort of thing you're thinking about?
Well, one of the things we have done, we have a dedicated link to Envision 2030 now because it's in the field. So certainly when you go to the web page, and our current web page, there's a place to go. It's kind of difficult to find. We made it as prominent as possible. But in our promotion, we're promoting tbarta-envision2030.com. So when David's talked to the media, or if I send out a press release, I'm asking them to go. This is really an alias page, but it's better than our current web page, which is /this/that. But if you type that in, www.tbarta-envision2030.com, and I do say dash because that's what it is, it will then, you'll notice it will redirect you to our website and our dedicated page, which looks a little better than our current site. It has a little bit of information, but very prominently at the top says what Envision 2030 is, how can you get involved? Take our survey. Would you like it in English? Would you like it in Spanish? And then it has a comment form by which you can send comments, other links down below by which you can engage with us. And that's what we're talking about, Bill was mentioning before, about how many people have asked to be on our newsletter or get TBARTA information on 2030. That's where you can click and get on those lists.
Because it struck me when Kelly asked about an app, and I think Bill commented that there are parts of our service area that we need to better reach. A single-click app might help facilitate that sort of thing.
That's true.
Just an idea.
All right, appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
I think that wraps that up. Michael, are you still on the line with us to give us a legislative update?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did include a summary of this year's session that we received from our state lobbyist, RSA, in your electronic packets. And I'm going to go through some of those things, highlighting which things DeSantis has signed and that admittedly interest me, but I think are of interest to the committee as well. So starting with one of the biggest things, transportation came out pretty well this session. The budget is the same as last year, and given that revenues for transportation are flat in a climate of reduction, that's a pretty fair deal for the transportation community at large. One of the big bills that came out of this session was Senate Bill 7068. That was a committee bill, which, if you're not familiar, is going to move monies collected through vehicle registrations currently allocated to general revenue gradually into the state transportation funds. So it's anticipated with those additional revenues by state fiscal year 21-22, should actually place an estimated additional $135 million per year in a trust fund, and specifically noted in that bill are construction of 3 regional corridors that will accommodate multiple modes of transportation and other various infrastructure improvements, including broadband and sewer access. So the Southwest Florida or Southwest Central Florida connector is going to connect Collier and Polk counties. The Suncoast connector from Citrus to Jefferson County, and the Northern Turnpike connector, which is going to start at the northern terminus of the Florida Turnpike and go northwest to the Suncoast Parkway. This was something that was strongly supported by Galvano from the beginning, and he really was a champion this session on increasing investment in transportation and infrastructure. Just 2 more things to highlight. Another one I think a success is House Bill 453, Micro-Mobility Devices and Motorized Scooters, which was sponsored by our own Jacqueline Toledo. That introduces authorization and guidance for regulation of transportation devices such as Bird and Lime or scooters, and clarifies the rights and duties of operators of those scooters now having the same as bicycle riders. For example, bicycles are considered an actual vehicle, so they're required to obey traffic laws, ride with the flow of traffic, yield right-of-way to pedestrians, and so on. So this brings scooters into that same light and treats them as motor vehicles as bicycles are as well. Another Toledo bill, HB 107, made texting while driving officially illegal. So that authorizes police to stop you if you are caught. So just a warning to those in the room, and pass it on. If you take that chance and you do get caught, the first violation carries a $30 fine plus court costs, which could add up to a total of $108. A subsequent violation committed within 5 years under that bill carries a $60 fine plus court costs. So it can wait. Last, but
Michael?
Go ahead.
Kelly had a question for you.
What was that number again, Michael?
107.
That was House Bill 107, sponsored by Jacqueline Toledo.
But I think that with that bill, I think if you're stopped at a red light or stop sign or in traffic,
Right.
you can still be in your phone.
You're not moving.
As long as you're not moving.
That's correct. Yeah, whether or not you're moving or not makes it a primary offense.
No,
No, you have to be moving. If you're stopped,
right.
you can't be ticketed for texting.
Okay.
Correct.
I got you. I had heard the opposite, actually, so apparently some hyperbole on people that want to be able to text and drive.
They should be riding transit.
There you go. Another good reason. So last but not least, from the non-recurring funds in specific appropriation 1989A, TBARTA is getting $2.5 million in non-recurring funds from the Transportation Trust Fund. Of those funds, $1.5 million is going to be dedicated for agency operations and administration, and the remaining $1 million is going to be used for things like feasibility studies and other projects working toward developing innovative options for transit. So a part of that's been specifically included, so they're saying, included but not limited to study of smart city innovations, autonomous vehicle services, multimodal transportation, hyperloop technology, cable and lightweight overhead road or string types of above-ground transportation, and public zero emissions transit. So in all likelihood, TBARTA is going to have its hands full here over the next couple of years in looking at a lot of things that are going to help bring the region together. And speaking of, we do consider this, of course, a major win, not just for TBARTA, but for the Tampa Bay region at large as well. Again, with resource scarcity being one of the most foremost limiting factors to effective regional transit coordination. And we've, as you all know, been talking a lot about speaking with one voice for a number of years now. So we consider this funding the opportunity to allow us to continue bringing the region closer together and to do a lot of the things TBARTA's never had the unencumbered funds to do in the past.
They're still
And that concludes
unencumbered.
Not dedicated toward any specific
Right.
one purpose. So, for instance, commuter services, we can't use that pot of funds for anything other than commuter services.
Right.
So this allows us some freedom.
Well, congratulations.
With that, I'd be happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Miller?
Is there a way, I noticed here that this is highlighted in blue, and this is an extensive legislative update weekly. Will this be on the website, or will there be a way that we can access this legislative update, maybe even by having a link or something sent to us?
A synopsis of your report, Michael.
Just like,
Sure.
so this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to include that on the website, or maybe I could just write up something and send it out to you all through
It
your.
was attached to the agenda on
Yeah,
the
we have,
website.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this particular piece of paper, like right here from RSA, is that available to the public to read that as a weekly legislative update? I know this is saying, 6/5 or 5/6. I'm assuming that's this week's from
Well,
RSA?
that was the end of the legislative session.
And so that's just it. That's the end of the whole session. It's not like a weekly update while they're in the
Right.
session? Okay, all right.
They're part-time workers.
I got you, because see how you can click on this blue thing and then you can follow the bill? That's why I was just trying to see if I could get this in computer form rather than paper form.
Yeah, and that is,
It's in our
Mr.
packet.
Chair is correct. It's currently on the website in PDF form, and the links included in blue on that document are live.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, if there's nothing else, Michael, do you want to go through the upcoming events and meetings?
Sure, so I've included a brief summary of some of the transportation and transit-related events that are coming up this month and early next month, and even looked a little bit farther ahead in some of the bigger things that are on the horizon. But the main thing this month, the MPOs are in the process of adopting their transportation improvement programs. As a part of that process, they are required to hold public hearings. So that provides, of course, the public the opportunity to speak in favor or in opposition of any projects that are proposed to be included for funding, which, as a reminder, this process is something MPOs are required to do to receive federal and state funding, and they're used in the allocation of surface transportation program as well as transportation alternative dollars. So it's a very important process for the MPOs, and they're fulfilling their role as a public agency and providing the opportunity to weigh in on what's being proposed as a priority for those funds.
Okay.
Another thing, aside from the MPOs, looking a little bit ahead, there is a big Safe Routes to School conference coming up in November, as well as a Gulf Coast Safe Street Summit. Both of these things relate very closely to the Vision Zero efforts that have been going on over the past few years. So focusing on ways that we can work together to basically have no traffic fatalities, which, as you know, Tampa still ranks pretty highly in that regard. For both of those events, registration is required and there are fees to attend. and I've made sure to include the links, which again, on the CAC packet are live. You can click on it and it'll take you right to the registration page if you desire to attend. One last thing I'll add that I overlooked, admittedly, with this is the Florida Autonomous Vehicle Summit. That is being held also in November from the 20th to the 22nd at the Hilton Miami downtown. They haven't shared a whole lot of information yet, other than they plan on showcasing some new developments in autonomous vehicle technologies. There'll probably be some demonstrations as there have been in the past. And registration is required for that event as well at favsummit.com. Pretty easy website to remember. You can go to and sign up to reserve your seat. And if you are interested, a reminder, in previous years, the FAV Summit seats have gone pretty quickly. So if you're at all interested in attending, you certainly need to consider registering as soon as possible.
Okay.
That concludes my report on events, Mr. Chair.
All right. We're up to new business. One thing I'd like to take a brief detour on is, and I should have done this at the very beginning of the meeting, and we have a new member of our board with us, Miss Sharon Calhoun. Could you just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and why you're interested in transit?
Okay. I'm Sarah Calhoun, and I am, I live in Manatee County. I live down in Anna Maria, but I previously lived in South Tampa. I'm a transportation engineer, so I am the president of a small consulting firm that mainly does ITS type work.
Okay.
So I've been interested in transportation. I've worked in District 7 and District 1 for the past 24 years or so. When we moved to Manatee County, I got involved with their local MPO and the CAC down there, which then has led me to this as well. So I'm very well ingrained in the whole transportation scene and very interested in where we're headed and the autonomous vehicle part of it as well.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thanks.
Is there other new business?
Just a question. Not sure where this would fit on the agenda. Some time ago, probably 2 years ago, we had a presentation on the autonomous vehicle track that FDOT was building out on I-4. Would it be possible for us to get some sort of an update, or is that no longer appropriate for us because we're transit versus transportation?
Yeah, Bob, you're speaking about Sun Tracks, correct, in
Yeah.
Polk County?
Yeah, Polytechnic, yes.
Yep. We haven't heard any updates from them in a while, but I agree with, the developments in autonomous technology and the intention of the partnership between Florida Polytechnic and Polk County, and making Florida one of the foremost places where autonomous vehicles are developed. Certainly, I think we want to either invite them back for a presentation or get some kind of update from them that staff can deliver. So we can consider that, Mr. Chair, for the next meeting in August.
Good. Thank you, Michael, because it was one of the things I was also going to suggest.
Yeah, I don't see him digging out there.
They've just gotten, several things have happened over there, including a major funding allotment, so the timing might be good.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I can jump in, because we're involved in that project, actually. The first phase of it, the track is, I understand, pretty close to completion. It's the interior, inside the track where they're doing all the automated testing and all that has started now, and that is under design. There's a consultant designing all that at this point. I don't recall the exact schedule on that, but they
Yeah, there were
definitely-
two different schedules. One was for the track and then the
Right.
other was for the interior.
Correct. The track had an early completion deadline that I believe was in April or just very recently. And so that portion is complete, but they're working on, I actually got to take a tour of it a couple months ago before they were finished and see the facilities, and we drove the track and all, so very interesting.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, right?
Ellen wants to drive.
Is that
Can we
a
take
road
field
trip
trips?
and me- Field trip, field trip.
Update, can we go there?
Okay,
With an enterprise van?
next item, we're just about ready to close out here. Items to report to the board, TBARTA board. We didn't have any action items to go back to them as recommendations on board items that they would, at least none that I recall us discussing. Is there anything, messages you would like to?
And if the committee would agree, I think it'd be helpful.
Absolutely, thank you, Bill.
Consensus to reemphasize that?
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, we've got isn't the session starting in January this year? Yeah, so we've got a short turnaround.
Yeah, they already put committee weeks out.
Right.
Exactly.
And I would suggest that it would be most easiest for us to interact with our legislative members in their districts back home before they get sucked up to that process. So that it's very appropriate to remind the board that we're here to help. Okay, are there other messages to send to the board?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, but I'm seeing a real movement here of TBARTA since it's enlarged from having a total staff of 4. And it seems to be moving, and moving in a good direction. And I would like to pass forward that word toward the board.
I echo that.
That we're pleased.
Absolutely.
Is that also something you'd like to pass on?
Oh, absolutely. We like the new people. Hi, guys.
We like to use people too, but
Yeah, Michael had gotten used to it.
He's Charlie now. He's on the phone always.
Okay. I'll pass that also along. Is there anything else? Otherwise, we have requests for the next board meeting. I think we've already talked about several things from the transit plan. Bill Ball, you'll be back to us. And also, Scott, would you be back at our next meeting, or we skip a meeting here?
I will take direction to our staff, but I'd be happy to come back.
Well, I'd like to make sure that we have an effective meeting, and we did talk about inviting the partnership to come and have the discussion on the gold standard, so you'd certainly be welcome to attend that.
That presentation has been confirmed, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great.
And the date of the next meeting is the 21st of August?
It is the 21st of August at 1:30
Yep.
at the PSTA auditorium.
And Mr. Chair, if I could share one thing with the committee before we adjourn. Just that my wife and I welcomed a healthy baby boy to the world last Thursday at 9:28 p.m. Both mom and baby are doing great, and big sister is working really hard on sharing her attention as well.
Congratulations, Mike.
Congratulations.
Well done.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And that was just yesterday?
That was Thursday,
Wow.
May 30th.
No?
So a little out of sorts over the past couple of days, but
Yeah.
getting back on track here very quickly.
Okay. Is there anything else that needs to come to the attention of the committee today? With That being the case, we will adjourn 2 minutes early.